It's the weekly PhD log, week 20. Woo, we made it all the way to 20. Isn't that exciting? Just another 200 to go. Uh, no, what's that? 100 no, 125 left to go. Yeah, I should probably not think about it in those terms. That's not going to do anything for my mental health. Okay, let's talk about agentic AI. As I've mentioned in previous weeks, I've been on the hunt for examples of agentic AI use in counter-violent extremism. So, because we want to focus in as tightly as possible on the research topic, which is looking like it's going to be the use of agentic AI specifically for CVE, counter-violence extremist work or counter-extremist work on social media, and the ethics, and then come up with an ethical framework that surrounds that. Do a bit of a governance round robin with key stakeholders. And so I've been doing two things the last 3 weeks that have focused on that. Firstly, I've been learning what agentic AI is and how it works and how it's different from generative AI or large language learning models and so forth. Second thing I've been doing is pumping my networks, as many of you will be very aware, to find any examples, current or emerging, of agentic AI use in the CVE space. Finally starting to get some traction there, which is great, including one with, who was it, ThroughLine, who's working with the Christchurch Call over in New Zealand to better support their existing diversion programs and de-radicalization programs that they already have in place over there. So this is very interesting, actually. So yeah. So the first part has been learning about how agentic AI works. Now, witness a social scientist attempt to explain to you the technicalities of agentic AI. Woo. Okay, so I've learned about Gen AI. I spent the first few weeks of the research doing all of that, but agentic AI is a bit different. So the distinguishing feature, as far as I understand it, is that your large language learning models or your generative AI, the old school version of AI, old school, it was like 2 years ago, right? But where we started a couple of years ago when this started becoming a thing, they're very, very good at performing specific tasks within a specific frame in one go, right? They traditionally, many of them did not have access to the internet because they simply couldn't pass it. But things like spell checking or writing a single piece of code or single section of code or writing a letter or something along these lines. And they were getting quite compelling at it, but they were very limited in scope and complexity. And if you asked it to do multiple different things at the same time, it would get overwhelmed and it would fail. So limited scope, limited capacity, but good within those scopes and those capacity. Agentic AI, in this case meaning agent AI of an agent AI. Geez, it took me forever to figure that one out. But basically is a variety of these existing AIs, generative AIs in a trench coat, basically, with one sticking out the top that's in charge. Think of it as a organizational hierarchy comprised of generative AIs. So in other words, to simulate comprehensive planning and project management and all this sort of thing and tasks, it's got one Gen AI that's in charge of several others that have been delegated with specific subroutines. And the one on the top is specific subroutine is coordination. I cannot even begin to imagine the technical back end of that and getting that to work. The theory of the framework or the concept of it is pretty straightforward. But to get it to actually function, God knows. I mean, I've been learning about how Gen AI and how it works in general with linear regression and sigmoid functions and all this sort of business. And I think I had the sort of broad understanding of the concept, but in terms of the actual programming, my God. And neural networks, which is another, again, intuitive concept, but very, very complex to program, as I experienced when they attempted to test me on it. I'm doing a Coursera course on machine learning, and oh my God. Yeah, maths, not my strong suit. Not my weak suit, but not my strong suit. So, the long and short of it is that agentic AI is vastly more capable and vastly more, in particular in terms of abstract thinking and planning and interacting with the user to refine the question. One of its great strengths is that it can ask if it doesn't understand what it needs to do, or if there's multiple ways of going about it, it will, on occasion, prompt the user for refinement of the question and refinement of the parameters and give suggestions of how it could work better. So it is self-reflective in this context to a limited degree, of course. So it can do complex stuff. The pros of that is that it can do vastly more complex activities. It is not with beyond the realm of reason, and as thus far I have found no specific reasons why it couldn't be asked to identify a variety of extremist posts based on the following parameters and then deploy the following or variations on the following pre-bunking intervention whenever you see people that meet posts that meet this criteria. That's probably doable right now. I could probably go over to ChatGPT and tell it to do that. Getting permissions, of course, is a different question entirely. But if I gave it my social media access and told it to use that to post, Captcha could be interesting. I'm not really sure. I'm talking to a few friends in the industry. Apparently, that just doesn't really work anymore. But yeah, it doesn't stop me from running into it. But anyway, um, you wonder. There's so many bots on the internet now, so many, and so yeah, clearly whatever was there to scream from them before just isn't working. Either way, so it is doable. It might even do a good job, but with increased complexity comes increased risk, and particularly with increased autonomy, which is kind of the point of this. The whole point of agentic AI is that it is capable of increased autonomy. You can tell it to do a project as opposed to just a singular task that requires heavy monitoring. Everything still requires monitoring and review, of course, but again, the value of AI comes from not having to do that. So, yeah, we're still sort of rotating around that problem for the meantime. Um, the problem is that if it does go off base, it will rather, whereas a singular Gen AI, if it makes a mistake, it only screws up the task it was given. If you've given the AI a capability to do an entire project, such as identify extremist talking points online and then deploy an intervention, it can screw up the entire project, which in the case of counter extremism work could result in some pretty wildfire stuff. Increasingly, our decision to focus on pre-bunking as the more constructive intervention order as the intervention as opposed to say banning, obviously, which we can't really do, but or reporting or something more aggressive. I think the earlier a little while ago now, but I came up with some fairly aggressive interventions that could be trialed, and I certainly would be pretty interested to see how they went. But it's a bit experimental and it's a bit out there for now. Um, yeah, the more constructive option means that there's less scope for it to go wrong, but still, even with pre-bunking, if you target the wrong people, it could backfire. If you do it the wrong way, it could backfire, confirmation bias and the backfire effect and all that sort of good cognitive bias stuff. So we have to be careful. In other words, we can't trust it. And the risks become significantly larger the more autonomy this thing has. Because if it starts to misfire, if it starts to go off base, will we catch it in time? And even if we do catch it early, the scope of harm is significant. So, yeah, basically it's an acceleration of the same concept. It's becoming more sophisticated. Its fundamental nature hasn't changed that much, which is good for me. I've mentioned before, like there's the trouble with the ethical code here is that it needs to be applicable for new versions of AI as they emerge, because I've got 3 years to do this and things are going to change a lot in those 3 years. They certainly have in the last three. So the plus side of that, the upside is that I don't think that's going to be a major problem because while the technology definitely advances in interesting and potentially unanticipated ways, it seems to be a consistent trend of increasing complexity and capability, but the same type of capability, if you follow me. So in the same way, agentic AI is just a big collection of Gen AIs, which is fundamentally the same product, can do different things or more advanced things, but the same basic type of things. So I think the ethical code should be fine. In the same way that an ethical code for a professional association can be pretty consistent, even if the type of work the profession does is different, because they're still humans doing the thing, and still have the same governance problems. That's going to be a challenge either way, though. So case studies. Got my first one down. Very happy with it. This is all informal, of course, so I won't go into any detail yet. Haven't done the human research ethics stuff and formal interviews and whatnot. But the long and the short of it is that we tracked one down. So this is still being developed, but it's been publicized a bit. It's all public. So ThroughLine, over in collaboration with the Christchurch call, is using, It was publicized as ChatGPT, but it looks like they were mainly using Gemini as an agentic AI to basically basically power a chatbot. So the way this works is that it triggers, they partner with social media, but also search engines. So when someone searches for something that triggers flags, extremist content or otherwise, they are diverted to a variety of, what do they call them? Helplines, which they're verified, right? So they go through and they make sure that they've got a list of, I think it's 1,800 helplines or assistance services. Where I'll be here. Yeah, I'm gonna write this down somewhere. But anyway, yeah, that's the long and short of it. Oh yeah, 1,800 verified helplines in 180 different countries. So depending where you are and your geolocation, when you do the search or you get flagged, it'll divert you to the correct one. The service it provides is not providing help. It's connecting you to the relevant helpline. So it's not providing services, it is connecting. Now, this is a good use of AI in that sense because it's not attempting to be the counselor itself, which, my God, I don't even want to contemplate what will happen if you try and get an AI agent to try and do psychological care. Not to mention the accountabilities that would follow from that of like, well, who's responsible if it all goes horribly wrong? Anyway, so they do the middleman stuff, right? They do the automated detection and diversion, and they run a chatbot to do that. So basically, and risk minimization, it's single encounters of roughly 30 interactions. It's got no memory, which it's certainly capable of doing, but in this case, they've made sure that it's got no memory so that it doesn't pick up unanticipated patterns of behavior over time, particularly in reference to individuals' repeated use. Every time a user interacts with this bot, for example, it's a fresh go as far as the bot is concerned. So yeah, that helps remove emergent behaviors or unanticipated behaviors. It also helps with their aggression testing. And they have put this thing through the ringer. They reckon it's taken about 2 years of development to get it into the state where it is right now. They noted a couple of interesting twists. Is that constraint can actually worsen the performance. So you put too many constraints on the bot. You give it too many limitations of how it can and cannot function. And from like you can sort of empathize with this in the sense of like it gives it too many things to verify every interaction against, which means it slows down, it breaks the conversational flow, and it removes its ability to adapt, which is the whole strength of an agentic AI or even a large language learning model to interact with the people it's talking to. Now, obviously, the limitations are critical, but at the same time, what they found was they weren't very constrained to start with, that broke its functionality or its usefulness. They gave it a bit more flexibility, and the entire thing works quite a bit better. It takes less time to think through its responses, and its responses are much more humanistic and therefore effective when it comes to talking to the people that need to be diverted. They've done a variety of different risk governance methods, all very, very good, and that we can elaborate on once we do the proper interviews and the et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, comprehensive. I don't think it's been deployed as yet. It's still being developed and it will be deployed at a later stage, but good, solid application. And you can see it's been very heavily thought through. So we're off to a good start here. I need a couple more of these just to clarify, but thus far it appears to be it appears to serve as an example that agentic AI is entirely viable as a CVE intervention vector, and some of the early governance frameworks surrounding it. So that's a good start. I think it'd be good to take this to Matteo when he gets back, my supervisor. See if I can track down a couple of others and keep expanding my network, which is good because it gives me ins for when I need to do that formal data stuff, including someone you're going to catch up with a couple of people from social media companies in the next couple of weeks, which will be great. Yeah, so it's always good to build coalitions around this sort of stuff and be proactive. So fingers crossed. And in case anyone's bothered to watch this far into the video, if anyone's watching the video who's helped me with this process, thank you immensely. Seriously, the outpouring of support from LinkedIn, as it turns out, is fantastic. I think it helps when you're doing a PhD. People are a bit more like, well, this is for the common good as opposed to private interests. So there's less suspicion and more enthusiasm. That, and to be honest, academics are always pretty generous. Though quite a few private business people have also reached out, which was really appreciated. Really nice, Sense of, well, community is a strong word, but you know what I mean. Rightio. Well, I'm in Sydney next week. I'm gonna pop up there to visit some friends, but also gonna take the opportunity to connect with a few contacts in person up there, and we'll see how we fly. But in the meantime, it's going well.